Hello, my dear friend Terry. Welcome, welcome.
Why, thanks for having me, Liz.
I'm so glad to see you and introduce you to my following and just share with them your incredible insights. I'm so excited to have this conversation tonight.
Me too.
Terry Cole is a dear friend, a friend of Target 100, and it's great to have her here. Terry actually even did our beginner's course at Target 100, and that's how we met. And then we got to talking, and I heard about her incredible book and read it and asked her to be on the show. So, Terry is a licensed psychotherapist and a global relationship and empowerment expert. For over 2 decades, Terry's worked with diverse groups of clients that include everyone from stay at home moms to celebrities and Fortune 500 CEOs. She has a gift for making complex psychological concepts accessible and actionable so that clients and students can achieve sustainable change. I think that's why we get along so well. I feel like that could be my bio. That was always sort of what people said about me. You make
Yep.
these complex food issues seem simple. So, and that's what I really felt when I read your book. I see you have it behind you, but I'm going to hold it up for everybody so that they can order it
Thank
now.
you.
So I'm excited to have this conversation because when we had our one-to-one call, we started talking about how boundaries really can affect somebody's weight at the end of the day. And
Mhm.
I was like, oh, finally someone's speaking my language. I have a secondary course called The Next Level, in which I have a couple of mystery pillars that I say, and one of them is, I call it the power of no. And I guess
Mhm.
that was my instinctual way, because I didn't have the language that you
Right.
do and the education that you do, but instinctually working with so many people just seemed like every time I got on a call, it was like, oh, well, there's no time. And I said no to this thing that I don't really want to be doing, or I'm on the PTA board and I hate it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, whoa, whoa. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Me too. Can I say something to the
Yes,
participants quick?
please.
You
Yeah.
guys, we're going to be interacting with you quite a lot in the chat. So please make sure that your drop down menu is set to everyone. Because if not, then only Liz and I will see what you're saying. And we want everyone to see what you're saying because I love a participation moment.
We love it. We love it. Target 100 is all participation. So I
Yeah.
have my chat open. So as we're going, I'll be peeking at it to make sure if there are
Hmm.
questions, because I want people to be able to ask you since we have
Definitely.
you here. So let's just start with you and a little bit about your history and your story and how you landed where you are.
Well, why boundaries? If that's part of
That's
the
exactly
question,
right. Yeah.
is that I was really a veritable boundary disaster. And you know how they say, you most teach what you most need to learn. Well, that was very true for me. And for a long time in my life, I didn't realize that a lot of the pain, conflict, disappointment, resentment, so much resentment that I was carrying was because of my disordered boundaries
Mhm.
and my tendency to overgive, over deliver, over function, be codependent. There was all of these things
Sure.
that were mixed up in that. But what I realized when I started doing it in my own life and realizing how it changed my life, then I became a psychotherapist and I saw it as this epidemic that I couldn't believe that it didn't matter who came into my office or what their presenting problem was in therapy speak, where you come in for, there's some reason why, usually something happens, some precipitating event that will catapult people to take the action to get into therapy. And it didn't matter what they were talking about, what got them there, whether they were going through menopause and couldn't sleep and they were exhausted, whether they were having trouble in their marriage, whether they were not being paid equally at their office, whatever the thing was. I could just follow the crumbs backwards, right? The dots backwards to the original injuries. And they all led back to this inability to know and or express their personal boundaries. They didn't even know what they were, basically, because I didn't even know what they were. So when I realized that it was such an epidemic, and I mean, I've been a psychotherapist for 25 years. So, and I only wrote this book a year and a half ago, right? So imagine how many case studies and people and experiences, and I was saying the same things over and over again. And I've had a public platform for over 10 years where I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to put these into mini lessons. And then eventually it came to, we really need the actual boundary Bible. So someone, no matter where someone is on their journey of like, I don't even know a boundary from a ball, or I'm trying, but I'm not great, or I'm uncomfortable, or I feel guilty, or I set boundaries that I want to take them back. Wherever you are, this book is for you. And you can plug yourself into this process. So I really think it's literally the most important life skill set to master, and that without it, we end up creating our own glass ceilings, whether it's with our health, whether it's with our careers, whether it's in our relationships, where there's only so far we can go if our boundaries are disordered.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that that's so true. And what I love so much in the book, and I thought would be really fun to share, is just, that, like you said, connecting the dots, almost like I see like breadcrumbs back to your childhood, really. You talk a lot about that, about kind of, and I wrote something down. You don't go back looking backwards to condemn, right? You don't look backwards to condemn, but you go
Right.
back to examine and to learn. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And how do you have people go through that process of thinking back to their childhoods to examine and discover where those boundary issues started?
Well, the easiest way, well, I'm going to give you two things right now. Someone's saying you can buy the book anywhere, you guys, and you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
go to boundarybossbook.com if you want to get all the juicy bonuses that are still there, even though everyone's like, you should take them down. I was like, why?
Why?
I
You're
made them for
helping
the
people.
people buying the book. Why am I
Exactly.
taking them down? For who? Anyway,
Yeah, and I
so
like
thank you for asking.
some of your folks are here that have read your book and taken your class. You also have
Oh,
a class, a crushing codependency class. So that's really exciting too.
indeed. All right. So two things. How do we sort of go back to the scene of the crime without feeling guilty, or like we're blaming our parents, or we're blaming the adults who raised us? We have to go back though, because here's the thing. As a therapist, I never was one of those therapists who was like, wow, I can't wait to talk about third grade for like 17 years. Do you know? I don't want to talk about third grade at all, unless there is something that happened in third grade that is unresolved, that is blocking you from getting what you want in your life right now. Then I am very interested. So we go through the process of looking at, where are you stuck now? What is happening? What are your repeated boundary realities, is what I call them, where you may find yourself like, wow, I'm in another relationship with an unavailable person, or wow, I have another boss who's a total a-hole, or whatever, right? Like we end up going, hi, how am I here again? And when you find yourself in a repeated situation, there are some questions that you can ask yourself to sort of identify, is there an original injury that needs your attention? So if you're in a conflict with someone, or you always end up with like controlling girlfriends, right? Let's just say that you
Yeah,
would
sure.
not
That's a
believe. And
great one.
I know you do know, Liz, but the amount of pain and suffering women in particular can have and play out in their female friendships is mind blowing. It's as much
Totally.
as people complaining about, you know, being misunderstood in their marriages. Like it's equal, but maybe even more painful. But anyway, so you're going to ask a couple of questions like, who does this person remind me of? So if you have a boss, let's say I had a situation, quickly, I'll tell you, where I was in my internship when I was in grad school, and I was working at a drug treatment clinic, and there was the boss there, and I just couldn't stand him. Like I would go into my therapist weekly and be like, Dr. Washington is such a jerk. He's so cold. He's so mean. He's so rejecting, all these things. And she's like, how well do you know this guy? Like you just started working there 3 weeks ago. And the heat of how I felt was, this is how you also know you might be having a transference, if you have an amplified response. And I
Mm,
just was like, no, he's a jerk. Now, what I couldn't see at that point was I couldn't look at my own behavior, which is that I avoided him if I saw him in the hallway. I would
okay.
literally jump into the bathroom to avoid him. I
Okay.
wouldn't talk if he was in a meeting. And it took my therapist, Bev, actually saying, all right, Terri, you've described this guy to me 5 times. Who does he remind you of?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, my father, my unavailable, emotionally not present, disapproving father. And I was having a massive transference to this poor guy who literally did nothing. And I was like, he's just a jerk. She's
Yeah.
like, is he really though? So this is when if I had had those questions, and this is how I created those questions,
Sure, sure.
and just asking, who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? And how or why is this behavioral dynamic the way I'm interacting? And if I had thought that then, I'd go, oh, I'm avoiding him. I'm afraid of him. These things would have clued me into that it was a repetition of my relationship with my father. So what happens is this, you have those questions, and there's a fourth question that we add that can also be very helpful,
Mhm.
which is, when I'm in this dynamic with this person, metaphorically, who do I become? And who do they become? And if I had had that question back then, I would have been able to say, I turn into my 10-year-old self,
Mhm.
and my boss turns into my rejecting father. Like that's what was happening there. So the question then is, why is this important? It's important because there's always a parallel process going on in our lives and in our relationships. It isn't just what it looks like. It's not just on the surface, especially if you are having what feels like an amplified response where you get mad very quickly, or you're deeply wounded by
Mhm.
someone who you don't really know that
Really
well,
know. Yeah.
right? You're like, if you don't love this person and you're deeply wounded, that wound is not about them.
No. I mean, and that's so helpful. I wrote down here, it's like a red flag if you're having a reaction, right, to somebody that is really not important in your life, right? Like this
Mhm.
guy, you see him at work, or this friend of yours who's barely, she's just a PTA mom with you, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, like, and you're just enraged or uh, feeling smaller than, or having reaction to, that's outsized, I think is a really excellent way to connect with, hey, something's happening for me here.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. I think what would be helpful, if it's all right with you, Liz, that we just
Yeah.
establish quickly, like, what are boundaries?
Yes, I did. I totally agree.
Because
And I
it's,
wrote down, what are healthy relationships as something to define as well.
yes. So let's just start with what are boundaries. According to me, I want you, all of you, to look at your boundaries as your own personal rules of engagement. So this is basically letting other people know what's okay with us, what's great with us, like what do we like, and what is not okay with us, like what is a no-go for us. That's what your boundaries are. And according to Terry Cole, they are comprised of your preferences, your limits, and your deal breakers, right? Your non-negotiables. And before we can go into sharing them, because to be a boundary boss, to be masterful around your boundaries, you have to not just know those things, but have the capability of transparently and frequently communicating them. And this really, therein lies the rub for many people. You may know it, but just not know the language. What words, and we will certainly tonight specifically talk about words, and I'll give you guys a whole guide that you can download that you can share with them later that will help you with some sentence starters. Because sometimes, my clients would come in and be like, I was right there. I was going to do it. I was going to. And then no words came.
Sure.
And so, one of my go-tos, and anyone in my crew who's here knows that I always use this. And this is a Marshall Rosenberg phrase. I'd like to make a simple request.
Mhm. Great.
Because really,
Yeah.
whether they're going to agree or not, any request is simple,
Mhm.
right? We don't
Mhm.
know that they're going to do it. But the important piece in all of this about you knowing your boundaries and being able to communicate them is realizing that it's not about what the other person does, that your healing is in your ability to know yourself and to navigate, right? Negotiate for yourself, to be able to say, hey, you know what? I would prefer we do this, or I don't feel like eating that tonight, or I am being mindful of my health. So I will not be having any cake, and please don't ask me again,
Mhm.
right? Or please support me in what I'm doing. So we will get to how this impacts weight, dieting, food, body image as well. But you can see how people crossing those boundaries, those lines, impact what happens in our internal experience.
Absolutely. So that's phenomenal. And then how do you define healthy relationship
Mm.
or relationships?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is there has to be mutual respect, where without that, I don't know, and maybe this is just me, but without mutual respect and trust, I don't know how anyone can build a strong relationship. And if you're in a relationship now where there isn't mutual respect or there isn't trust, it doesn't mean you can't build it. I've taught thousands, tens of thousands of people to do it, but I want it to be a goal. I want it to be something that you realize that the person who's closest to you, like when we partner with people for like life for like a long time, that is the person that you want to feel the safest with. And a lot of people don't, right? Because you're repeating unhealthy relationship patterns where what I learned growing up, and it was a heterosexual model of relationships and very old school,
Yeah.
was that men were people to be managed.
Mm.
This was do not tell the truth,
Mhm.
let them think that they're in charge, but really you're kind of the neck that's wagging the head, like
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
this stuff,
Uh-huh.
right?
You're
But
just
certainly not a friendship. No
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And it took a long time and years of therapy for me to realize, like, I don't want that. Like, that sucks. I do not want to. It's so much work. Who the hell? I can barely manage myself. I got to be manipulating and managing that one too.
Yeah.
Forget it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, being interdependent instead of codependent
Mm.
also is a really important sign of a healthy relationship. And what I mean by that is you are together. And when you're together, your togetherness creates something so unique and so beautiful that if you never found each other, it would never exist in this world. It's something that is so beautiful from
Mhm.
you meeting each other and being together. And yet you still are separate people.
Mhm.
And so I find it's very easy, especially if you suffer from codependency, to get incredibly lost in your relationships, to endlessly be of service in your mind to the relationship, to be
Mhm.
codependent where you're overly focused on the needs, wants, desires, situations, feelings, states, decisions of your person, rather than being there to support, have compassion, but not fix, right?
I love it. I love it. I think it's so important to talk about codependency and to really dive in deep there. I think that's, it often is something that people don't fully understand. You just gave a really nice sort of overview of it. Can you dig just a little bit more deeply into that? Because I think it does affect
Yep.
um, our, oh, we've got a lot of good stuff going on. Dar Campbell, nice work today. She has had a real big moment today, finding the courage to set a limit with an employer. That is a difficult thing to do. That's a scary thing to do, right? So nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go Dar, recovering people pleaser. I love it.
I love it.
So codependency. Oy, oy, oy. Here's the thing with codependency. It's also such an epidemic. That's what my next book is about, by the way. Literally.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you my definition of codependency so we can all be on the same page. It's when you're overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the decisions, the relationships, the situations of the people in your life to the detriment of your own internal peace, spiritual, psychological, financial well-being. Because here's the thing, Liz, we're all lovers, right? We're all like, we love the people we love. Of course, we're invested in their happiness. We want them to be happy. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about feeling responsible for their happiness, feeling responsible for fixing. And at the base of codependency is disordered boundaries. Because also at the base of codependency is a covert or overt bid to control the outcomes of other people. So we just want to avoid conflict. We just want to avoid the disaster. We just don't want our friend making that dumb mistake. We just don't want our kid failing out of school. We just don't want our partner to get fired. So we lie about where they were, that they didn't go into work because they were hungover, not because they were sick or whatever. So these, codependency itself, I feel like has been maligned and misunderstood,
I totally agree. I
right?
totally agree. Yes, yes. That's why I wanted you to speak so clearly around it, because you have such a beautiful way of making things very clear, and really you're laser sharp on your definitions. And I think people need to hear it. I mean, I think that's it, is like it's almost like been this cozy little dance around codependency.
Mhm.
Make it sort of like very like fluffy. It's not,
No,
it's a
it's
control piece, and I think
it
when you really look at that, it's amazing.
it's so true. It's a control piece, but also when you think about codependency, when we are auto accommodating and auto fixing and immediately just can't wait to tell the person what to do and helping them and doing crap people are not even asking us to do to be of service, what we're really doing is inserting ourselves in the center of the other person's situation. And when this came to light for me when I was in my 20s in therapy, and it was so painful because my self-image was that I was just a lover, that I was just generous, that I was just helping, that I just want everyone to be happy. And when I really saw the truth and was able to have compassion for myself, that I became a high functioning codependent. And I'm going to talk about the high functioning piece in a sec, for reasons. Like we are the way we are. We relate to boundaries the way we do for damn good reasons. It's not like anything is wrong with any one of you who is struggling with this.
No,
We were primed, right? Raised and praised to be self-abandoning codependents.
yeah,
Literally raised and
literally,
praised.
yeah. When we did those things, we were praised. When we
Yes.
left ourselves behind, when we were helping, when we were doing. And I feel so much a kinship to you. And I think it probably led us into these helping careers on some level, which I'm truly grateful for, because I love what I do every minute. But child of an alcoholic, learned from the day I was born how to be a codependent.
Yep.
And it's been that real, just true journey. And I still, because I teach habit and I teach about brain science and how those loops are still there today. And there
Oh
are
yeah.
moments that I find myself, and it's always because of too much stress or too little sleep, or
Mhm.
the kinds of things that drive me back into a pattern that is, it's almost like when we talk about an injury, and you said the word injury earlier in the, and it just was so lovely, because you talked about it as an injury that needed, did you use the word attention, that needed
Mhm.
focus or attention?
Attention. Mhm.
And that's such a lovely way to think about this, because it's sort of like if you hurt yourself playing tennis, and then you had an injury, you didn't feel guilt or shame around that injury,
Right.
right? You hurt your arm playing tennis, and you paid attention to the injury and
Mhm.
you fixed it, but the injury is always there. And then when you are overly stressed or overly tired, you could re-injure it again.
Yeah.
So these patterns that are in us for many many years can rear up again, and it's our job to identify them and be able to tend to that injury,
Yes.
and in a loving way, in a kind way.
Compassion. I
Yeah.
mean, this is the thing about self-compassion. Barbara makes a great point. She said, I'm always better at taking care of others than myself.
Yeah.
And I think that every person on here and every person who's ever going to watch this will literally say, hi, hands up, me too.
Me too. Right.
That the most natural thing when you're empathic, when you're a lover, when you're the bridger and the assuager in life, because women in particular, and I know we're not all women here, but in particular, this is how this has been our role.
The
And
condition.
so there's something about looking to ourselves and getting super committed to treating ourselves with the same love and kindness that we treat others. When we make a mistake, talking to ourselves the way we would our partner if they make a mistake, a 5-year-old kid we adore, if they make a mistake, we wouldn't be like, you stupid idiot.
No.
No, of course not. We'd be like, you were tired, babe. You need to sleep, rest. It's okay. You did the best you could. We have all of the right words, as
For
Barbara just said,
everyone
for
else.
all the other people, but we
Yeah.
want those to be for ourselves. I want to make one note on the high functioning piece of the
Yes,
codependency,
yes,
because I know for sure, Liz, that you're a high functioning codependent, and so am I. I mean,
absolutely.
we're recovering,
Yes.
but it is the same thing. What you made a really great point in that those activation points still exist. And as we're recovering from being boundary disasters and being codependent, it is an ongoing process. The same way going to the gym is, the same way eating healthy is, the same way treating our bodies like the God pods, as Chris Carr would say that they are. It's a discipline, right? It's a practice. It's a daily experience, as opposed to, oh my God, I'm cured, yay. Like crushing. I didn't name my course on codependency, Curing Codependency, because that's not happening.
It's not happening. Yeah.
We are managing it the same way. I don't drink alcohol because I was an alcoholic. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I will always be in recovery from that. So with the high functioning piece of this, the reason why I created this phrase is because my clients didn't identify with being codependent. So if I would point it out, because they're like you, they were like the people here, very, very capable, very high functioning, getting crap done all friggin' day long, multitasking, doing it all, taking care of the aging parents and then the kids, and then going to the PTA and all the things. So if I would say to a client, oh, hey, what you're describing is codependent behavior, they would immediately go like, no, 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 no. You misunderstand. I'm not dependent on squat. Everyone is dependent on me. I make all the dough. I'm making all the decisions. I fix all the problems. Everyone comes to me in the family when they need something. And I was like, oh my God, my clients don't understand what codependency is, the actual nature of codependency. And it was the same flavor of codependency that I had in my life. And I didn't identify with the Melody Beatty codependent no more identification of, you must be involved with an addict and you are enabling them to underfunction, and that's what it is. It was so much more than that. And so when I added the high functioning in front of codependency, my clients were like, yeah. And so what is a high functioning codependent?
Yeah.
It is you who are so highly capable that you are doing it all and you're making it look easy. And people think it's easy for you, but really we are doing it all at the expense of ourselves, at the expense of our health, many of us, at the expense of our internal peace that we all seek so desperately, because we are so overly involved in wanting to fix the life of other people. And so that high functioning piece kind of changes everything, because it makes you realize it's not about being dependent.
Right.
It's about being overly invested and doing things for others that they can and should be doing for themselves, feeling responsible. Like if your best friend calls you with a problem, because a lot of people will be like, I don't know, I don't think I'm codependent. And I'm like, okay, well, if your best friend calls you with a problem, I want you to check your urgency. How urgent does her situation become to you? Are you able to ask expansive questions, or are you immediately like Googling shit and like being like, I'm calling my friend who's a neurologist? Like, we can't wait. We can't wait to involve all the people we know
Totally.
to fix the friend's problems. We're underlining things in a book. Like,
Yes.
that is loving, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's codependent. And what we want to make the distinction of is that if we're doing that, even though it feels loving, and there is love there, but if we can't not do it, it's a compulsion, just like any other compulsion. And what we're really doing, I learned in my 20s, is that that person's pain is creating total anxiety inside of us. We want the anxiety to stop. So we want to tie that up in a neat bow. They're fixed. Everyone is good. Okay, good.
Mhm,
Now my anxiety will lessen.
mhm.
So it's really a self-focused thing, believe it or not. So anyway, I hope
Yeah,
that was clear, that
yeah,
explanation.
so clear. I love that you use the word urgency and the way that I sort of experienced it, and when I am experiencing it, still to this day, understand that it's flaring up for me, and I have certain
Hmm.
people that really do flare it up, that urgency feeling. I always called it like high drama. Like,
Hmm.
oh, you're right. You went from 0 to 60. Like it was like,
Mm.
right, like you said, it's I'm having this issue with one thing, or it's, I'm not feeling well, I have a headache. Oh, you have cancer, right? Like it's like jumping
Right.
so far and then becoming so invested. So I love that idea of check your urgency, I think is really, really special. Um, I love that you said, I wrote down that you said it's all at the expense of yourself. And I experience that a lot with my clients, that they do so much of this, maybe unrecognized codependency, or
Mhm.
boundary issues, and they're so exhausted and they have nothing for them truly, that it turns them to something very immediate, filling them with food or
Mhm.
alcohol. And
Mhm.
that it really is, when I find someone really have a breakthrough and discover real lasting weight loss, right? You've been in my courses. It's when they
Mhm.
stop allowing the mean girl, I call her the mean girl, to show
Mhm.
up and constantly berate her for, berate ourselves for what we've done wrong, who we are not good enough, and all those
Mhm.
things. And then that stopping all of this stuff that exhausts us to the point that we have nothing. So I'd love to hear
Mhm.
your thoughts around people's reactions and why food and um, weight are connected here.
Well, they're massively connected, as we both know, because here's the thing. When we think about why we eat, why we drink alcohol, why people smoke weed, why people, I mean, there's many reasons why we eat, but I'm talking about eating to numb.
Mhm.
So these are mood altering activities that we are doing to not feel something. And so we can't fix what is, or understand, process, honor what's happening within us or what situations need our attention if we are constantly numbing them. And so I'm going to give you guys this little thing that you can use. And it's a tool that I put it in the book, but I also use it a lot with my work because it's very easy to just pull it out of your back pocket and be like, okay, I'm going to ask these questions and I'm going to get some clarity right now.
Mhm.
Is these are secondary gain questions because everything we do for a reason. Our brains are logical. If we're in pain and if I want to numb with ice cream, it's actually going to work for a period of time. I
Absolutely.
will feel joyful personally while I'm scarfing down that sundae. I will,
Mhm.
because it's so delicious. But
Exactly.
then I will feel lots of not good feelings later if it's something that I said I wasn't going to do, or if I was had more than I said I was going to, or whatever the thing actually is. So here is the anything that you find yourself in where you're stuck. Could be with your relationship to food. Exactly. And it's a self-sabotage, correct. You're going to ask these secondary gain questions. So secondary gain is the unobvious gain that we get for staying stuck in any situation where, and it's not primary gain because that would be obvious, right? The primary gain of going to the gym is, we getting healthy, right? This is obvious. We know that. Most people, it's counterintuitive where you go, gain, I'm not gaining anything by overeating at night and then beating myself up the next day, but there's something. So I'll tell you a quick story about a client of mine who over the pandemic was drinking too much. And she was every night, she was drinking like 3 big glasses of wine. And then she came in, she's like, listen, I don't want to drink during the week anymore. It's too much. My brain is fogged. I'm hungover. I feel gross. I don't want to do it. I was like, okay. She's like, will you help me stay accountable? I said, sure. So first week, And we talked about how that would be. I was like, why don't you write it down? I gave her some tools of things that she could do. And the first week, she's like, I made it to Tuesday. I literally only made it one night. What's wrong with me? I have no willpower. Now we're focusing, right? We're focusing on the drinking.
Yeah.
We're focusing on her making herself feel terrible. The next week, she's like, same thing. I only did Monday, and then I drank on Tuesday night, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, I was like, oh, it's not about the drinking. It's about the secondary gain of the drinking. So I said, okay, answer these questions. What do you get to not face, not feel, or not experience by continuing to drink 3 glasses of wine every night? And she immediately said, I get to not face the state of my marriage. I was like, oh,
There we are.
that's what we should be talking about. Right? It's not about you, but right. It's not about you beating yourself up, but there's this, it's a diversionary tactic from the actual thing. So you guys, if you find yourself in a situation and you go, what do I get to? Let's say you're having difficulty staying on your eating the way that Liz says to eat, the way that I eat, because of how Liz says to eat, which I love because it's not super restrictive and because you can live an actual life and do it. But if I'm going way outside of that, there's a reason. And I'll ask myself, what do I get to not face, not feel, not experience by continuing to do this behavior? And maybe I'm feeling, for me, I would honestly answer and say, oh, I'm feeling stressed. I just penned my next 2 books. I'm nervous. I now need to get my first manuscript to them by April of next year. Like, oh my God, like there's pressure.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's lovely.
Mhm.
But I will be able to find something, because we do things that are logical, even when they feel illogical. So I want you to use this secondary gain tool when you're like, why am I doing this? Well, when you find out what you get to not face, not feel, and not experience by continuing to do it, it makes it so much easier to stop.
Yeah. Well, and I love that because again, I'm always trying to calm that idea, even the word self-sabotage, like I think we use it against ourselves, right? Like we're always sort of in this space of like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I'm trying to mess this up. That self-sabotage word feels like a mean girl to me. You're
Mhm.
never really actually trying to mess anything up.
Right.
There's actually a positive intention behind every action you take. And when you recognize that, right? So now the food is to help you reduce the anxiety that you're feeling around your books.
Yeah.
You go, that makes such sense. And again, it's like that child, that being gentle and kind to the child that you are still nervous
Mhm.
helping that child work through those feelings instead of stuffing them down, which feels good and is smart too, right?
Right.
Like
Because it's adaptive in the moment.
it is.
So in that moment, there's relief. But what ends up happening is when you can identify your secondary gain. So let's just use the example of the books. The moment I realized, oh, I was overeating on my carbs and stuff because of that stress, I'm like, what productive action can I take that will lessen my stress? I talked to my team and we've got a writing schedule. And I'm like, oh, I can definitely do this. Like, I'm going to do this,
Yeah.
but not so the panic feeling, like I was able to do something productive. But if we continue in the cycle of doing what Lynn had said, right, the self-sabotaging stuff,
Yeah.
then there's no it just is wake up and do the same thing the next day, as
Yeah.
opposed to what is the productive action that I can take.
Well, and I actually underlined this exact thing in the book. It says the concept of repeating boundary patterns was inspired by Freud's theory of repetition compulsion, which he described as the desire to return to an earlier state of things. This is based on the idea that humans seek comfort in the familiar, even if it's painful. It's human nature to repeat experiences, whether positive, benign, or outright destructive.
Right on.
Yeah. And so, in my world of teaching habit formation, we talk a lot about the brain science, right?
Mhm.
Around The fact that that comfort level, the brain is so much more comfortable, even if that thing is destructive.
Yep.
Going through that routine is much easier. It understands the outcome. And I talk about the brain in a way of like, I just want to think about it like a supercomputer, that if you could take it out of your head and put it on the counter, it would
Mm.
actually be more helpful, because it is such a machine that desires the control alt delete, control alt delete, control alt delete, so much more than control shift escape. Like it
Right.
doesn't want to go in that direction. When you do, it feels so unnatural. I often say to people, that's when I know I'm doing it right, is that I
Mm.
get that feeling that this not difficult or hard. I hate those words, but that I'm a stranger in a new land. Those feelings
Yes.
of like, I'm not sure what's going to come next, or I'm not sure how to feel in this moment. That usually tells me I'm in the right space.
That's a perfect description of what transformation feels like.
Mhm.
Where when people say, how do I draw boundaries with people with nobody ever getting mad? I'm like, oh, you can't. How do I, do this without feeling guilty? Here's the thing. You're going to examine your guilt. You're going to look at your guilt. You're going to befriend your guilt. I can't tell you how to stop feeling, but I also want all of us to be on the same page that feeling anticipation, right? Instead of fear, I like to call it anticipatory anxiety,
Mhm.
right? Where we're doing something new, expect that this is going to jack up our nervous system a little bit. It's okay to be uncomfortable. You know why? You are not that fragile. Uncomfortability is not going to kill you. And what it does is it gives us the space to create new neural pathways in the brain, a new way of looking at ourselves, a new way of looking at our worth, a new way of looking at our relationship to food, as you have taught me and so many other people, that we know. I mean, Liz, you teach so much about this and so much in your book too, about how we have the power to create new neural pathways, because when you think about what creates them, it's repetitive thoughts, repetitive actions.
Mhm.
So you're the queen of new habits, and of what does it look like to go, wow, man, this habit is self-sabotaging. It
Mhm.
really is getting in the way. And if we can understand the secondary gain of that habit, it's so much easier to put it down and to do something, even if it's just slightly healthier.
Yes, yes. And yeah, and I think that that's it, is, we use this image, and I think it's helpful to help, this is a very hard concept to think of neural pathways. And in
Mhm.
the courses we often teach about, we think about, if you think about a big field of tall grass in front of you,
Mhm.
literally chest high tall grass in front of you. And if you've been walking, if you had to walk through that field every day, you're going to walk over this section of grass. And then the next day you push that grass down. So you're going to walk over, it's going to get nice and smooth, right? And
Mhm.
you're going to feel like, oh, and why would you ever take the path where you have to like machete through all this other? So what we're asking you to do when you decide, what, I'm not going to eat on the couch after dinner tonight, you have literally walked the grass of eating on the couch after dinner tonight 1,000, if not
Mhm.
more times. And we're saying, no, go machete your way through. And we teach you the tricks and the tools, but these neural pathways, they never go away. So there are
Mhm.
nights, you and you'll get all, kind of like, look at me, I haven't eaten on the couch in weeks, months. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there you are. Because that short grass that you mash down, it never goes away. The neural
Right.
pathway
It
is,
doesn't get tall again.
it never pops back up, right? Like it's
Right.
there, it gets overgrown and it's not as easy,
Mhm.
but it's still there. So understanding that when we ask you to make these changes, I don't ask you lightly to
Right.
make these changes. And I know you don't either. It's like
Mm-mm.
these are difficult self-aware moments around, can I take, and I like to try to teach the pause before that, right? Can we get you to stop before that habitual moment of something that doesn't serve you?
Mhm.
If we can get you there, then we can help you to become aware of, I want to use the right words, the secondary gain.
Yeah.
But it's very hard when you're barreling down a highway at 1,000,000 miles an hour, which I think is what codependency gives us, is like
Mm,
this ability to not think about ourselves. At least that's for me, that's what I found
yeah.
was I could focus all my energy on everyone else and not think about what I needed, what I wanted. And then I didn't have any self-awareness to be able to say, let me pause for a moment. Do I really want to sit here and eat on the couch again tonight? And
Hmm.
what am I getting from it?
Yeah.
That's a big ask. It's a big
It
ask.
is, but think about it when, I would think about my father who was a very high functioning alcoholic. I mean, he would say, I only know this through my mother, right? Because the guy literally probably said 50 words to me before my parents got divorced. But he would say like, he would drink on the weekends and he was very successful. So he was like the worst kind of alcoholic because they're so slippery. No DUIs,
Yeah.
like no losing it in public, no, but just not present. And he would say, I work hard. I deserve this. And we can do the same exact thing with food. And when I was younger, I would,
Thing I hear from folks is
yes,
well, by the end of the night, I just feel like I deserve this. And they do. You do. Like you do. But I hear it
but
all the
but then again, let's be clear about what this is. Because I also see, I counter it when I feel myself falling into that old behavior of like, I deserve this. I go, you also deserve to reap the physical benefits of your hard work because I work out every day and I drink 100 ounces of water because of you. And I do a lot of things. And I'm like, you deserve the fruit of that labor too. So
time.
can you find a place in the middle? Can you have one cookie and not four? Can you, right? Can you feel like you gave yourself a treat without doing something that's going to undo your ultimate goal, which
Yeah.
is feeling good in your body? For me.
And I love also your idea of the secondary gain around the word deserve, because I think again it's like you're saying I deserve this in the moment, and what you actually deserve or are looking for might be stress relief or relaxation or escape. And by actually recognizing what it is that you deserve
Mhm.
and going for that actual thing, and saying yes, certainly can I achieve it with food, but that doesn't help me achieve or get what I really deserve, which are the reaping of those benefits. um,
Yes. And the familiarity is the thing that I find if I'm going back into an old behavior of relating to food in a particular way, and I can see the scale is starting to move, and I'm like, oh, you're so familiar, like you're so intimate with this 10-pound struggle.
yes.
And some people would be like, oh, shut up, it's only 10 pounds. But it doesn't matter. It's the same exact hell. It's the same psychological prison
Yes.
that many other things. It's not as much, of course, if someone has 100 pounds to lose, then you have a different physical ramification for that. But it can take up just as much space
Oh,
here.
and I mean, we've been teaching this week all around diet mentality, and I hoped
Mm,
we get here into the loop of diet mentality and how familiar that loop is for people. It actually becomes more comfortable. And diets are the ultimate codependency. That is the ultimate in putting all of your energy towards something outside of you that has nothing to do with you, that somebody else wrote and said you should eat from this list of foods, and you believe in it wholeheartedly until you can't, right, until it destroys you.
right.
And then but the industry has us so convinced that we can't be trusted,
Mm,
that we can't be trusted to choose our own food intake.
right.
That and I did that from the time I was 14 as a codependent child of an alcoholic. So it became this lovely, wonderful loop that I went through over and over, because I knew what it
Mm,
felt like to gain all the weight back and then have to climb that hill again. And it was like this cycle. And it was really recognizing my codependency on
mhm.
these diets and trying to, that's my life's work now, is to
Yep.
break people through that and help you design what works for you and set your boundaries around that,
Yes.
and not allow that in anymore. So but that familiar cycle, it's a very comfortable place.
Yeah,
to
it's
let
like a little whoopee. It's like a little, I liken it to like a little blankie where you feel like you need it. My clients would be like, no, but I can't get out of this terrible relationship because blah, blah, blah. And I would say, it's like a whoopee where you're pulling it up, but what you're not doing is looking, and there's SOS pads in it, and there's glass shards, and your arm is bleeding, and it's not keeping you warm, but it is familiar. It's like the devil,
Totally. Totally. Yeah, no, I think that's it, is this idea of really going into uncharted territory and unknown lands, and being excited about that and saying, I want to see something different. And I teach, very small steps in that,
Mhm.
right? Focusing on it,
Right.
and figuring all of that out. And you have some pillars, I have pillars, but you have these beautiful, the 5 pillars of self mastery.
I do.
And I thought it would be nice for you to just kind of run down those, in an overview sort of a way for folks as they, begin to want to master themselves. I mean, they wouldn't be watching this if they weren't curious,
Right.
right?
Exactly. So we start with self-awareness, because you can't change anything you're unaware of or anything you're in denial of. We move into self-knowledge, where we're collecting information about your specific life experience, because why you are the way you are is incredibly unique to you. Then we move into self-acceptance, which is the third pillar, because that can be really hard for us to accept, like, hey, this is what I experienced. This is what happened. We want to protect our families. We want to protect the adults who raised us. We don't want to feel like we're blaming them. My clients would be like, it was 30 years ago. What the hell's wrong with me? I'm like, listen, we need to acknowledge and accept what happened. And you can't just skip to accept. There has to be that awareness, gathering of the self-knowledge, then the acceptance. Like, I'm not saying you need to be mad at your folks now, but I'm saying the little kid in you is. So how about we honor how she's feeling? So that's where the self-acceptance comes in. And then we move into the fourth pillar, which is probably one of the most challenging for the people who take my courses, is self-compassion. For all the reasons we said before, it's so much easier, as Barbara said, to take care of others and to have compassion for others, and be so punitive with ourselves and be so like, you should know better, or you get what you deserve, or just think of all the mean crap we say to ourselves.
Oh my God.
It's terrible crap you'd never say to someone else. So self-compassion is one we work on forever as well.
Yeah.
And then the fifth one is self-mastery, which is basically you truly being empowered in your life, really being self-determined.
Love it. And this idea of self-compassion, right? And it being so difficult. Where does that stem from?
Well, we're taught how we are indoctrinated, right? What do I say? Raised and praised for being self-abandoning codependents. She would give you the shirt off her back. I want to be like, Betty, keep your shirt on. Who are you giving your shirt to? You give your shirt off your back to anybody? Like,
Yeah.
but people, we are taught that the more self-sacrificing you are, the better person you are. It's considered pious. It's considered good. It makes you a good person. And here's the thing, it doesn't, right? Because it makes you're doing it in a compulsive way when we are overgiving in that way.
Mhm.
And it's so important. You have got to take care of yourself first, because if not, when we are this overly giving and overly self-sacrificing, what happens is we end up martyred. No matter what we say our intention is, if you overgive for too much, if you say yes when you want to say no for too long, if you do things that others can and should be doing for themselves, you will feel used. You will project that others are entitled.
Yes.
So it's a one-way ticket to Bitterland. There's no other stops on that train. That's it. So it's very important that we really get our self-care and we prioritize the way that we feel and what we want. Someone had said before in the comments, like, I almost had a breakdown at a certain point, and then I realized I wasn't going to keep doing things that didn't make me happy. And that is like the wake up call of a codependent, where you go, wait a minute,
No more.
What am I doing? I am prioritizing the happiness of like all other human beings and sentient beings on earth except me,
Mhm. And
right?
it may, I would just say from my own experience even, that it may be a discover, you may need to go on a discovery journey of what makes me happy, because I
Mhm.
didn't even know coming out of it. I had worked so hard at making everyone else happy. And that's what I was writing this down, is like, for someone, as they're getting started, and I know tons of folks are getting your book as we speak. And I see a question here from Fatima, and I know Fatima is very dear to my heart, and this is resonating for her a lot right now. But what do you do when you set your boundaries, make them clear, but they are constantly overstepped by the ones you love the most?
Well, this is where we set consequences, right? Because now you're talking about, I break it down in the book to boundary first timers and repeat offenders.
Mm.
And so what Fatima is talking about is a repeat offender. And so it's our job to add a consequence to that boundary request. So that may mean pulling yourself out of a situation. That may mean, I always give a simple example of you saying, let's say you're home cooking or your partner's, well, let's say it's you, you're home cooking, your partner's always late. You say, I'd like to make a simple request that if you're going to be more than 10 minutes late, you let me know so I can keep the food hot and we can eat together and we don't ruin our night fighting because you didn't let me know. It feels, yeah, I feel very unimportant when that happens. You say, then they do it again and you say, hey, we had a conversation last Tuesday. You agreed that you would let me know. Tonight again, you didn't let me know. And you're breaking my trust and not keeping your word. And if it happens again, I will not be making dinner for both of us. Yours will be in the refrigerator and I will eat when I want to.
Mhm.
And that's the consequence, right? You don't have to say that's the consequence, but it is.
Yeah.
It may not sound like a big deal, right? But when you actually take an action to, because of the repeated boundary violation, the other person, it hits the other person in a way that says, you will respect my boundary or you will not have the same exact access to me that you had before. And I'm glad Andrew said she thought it was a good example. Good, because I didn't know if it was like a
No, great.
pedestrian example, but it's
That was great.
right. Because it's also, we're not being like ridiculously dramatic with the consequences,
No.
right? We're not talking about I'm packing up and moving out necessarily, depending on the violation. But there can't, if you're having the same conversation, Fatima, drawing the same boundaries, the other person says, okay, cool, I'm in agreement, and then they keep breaking it, then you must take those steps. And I promise you that is way more effective than having the same conversation over and over and being frustrated or having your feelings hurt or crying. Doing something different usually really lets someone know like this is serious and it's our job to protect ourselves with those boundaries. And that's what you're doing when you add a consequence.
That was so fantastic. Perfect, perfect example. Well, I know we're almost at 9, and I want to respect your time. I want to respect everyone's time. I want to let you have a moment just to say, if you had 3 small things that someone could do, as they leave this call to
Mhm.
explore their own personal next steps, what might that be?
Okay. So the first thing I want you to do is do a resentment inventory because this will shine a light on where you probably need some attention for your boundaries.
Mm.
So that's helpful, right? Because most people go, I don't even know where to start. I'm like,
Yeah.
but you do, but you do. So you're going to do a resentment inventory. Who are you holding resentment for? And that will be the first step. You're going to, for 7 days straight, if you're someone who's a people pleaser and you normally say yes, you're going to resist the urge to agree to anything immediately. We're not agreeing to anything immediately. You're going to buy time and give yourself space to think. So you can do that by saying, someone asks you to do something and you say, okay, I need to check with my partner, my roommate, my dog. I'll get back to you tomorrow, Wednesday, Friday, whatever day you want. You're going to have a couple of phrases that you can pull together that, and I will give you guys this in the downloadable guide that my team is going to get to you, Liz,
Great,
for
great.
for all the
Oh,
people.
wonderful.
Um, So there'll be things in there. So it's how you can buy time. And this creates expansion for you, because here's the thing, unless it's an emergency, nobody needs your immediate yes. A lot of times we've just been habituated and trained that it's rude to think about it. Sometimes I'm going to say no to something. You know why? Because I just don't friggin' want to do it. I don't need to, and you don't need to over explain. And it really weakens your confidence in your no. If you feel like you need their approval of your no, you have a right to say no. We actually can't make it. We're otherwise engaged. What are you doing? None of your friggin' business. Most people won't ask that though. If you just say,
Right.
we can't make it, but I hope you guys have a great time. So I'll give you those things. And the last thing is that I really want you to, right now, in this moment, think about the fact that this hour that we spent together, this day in your life, could be the most powerful pivot you've ever experienced. That everything that you really want, the way that you want to feel, what you want in your life, I believe is on the other side of this skill set that I know for a fact you can learn. And it's not being mean. I want you to think about healthy boundaries as the bridges, not the blocks, to the most satisfying relationships, the deepest intimacy, and your greatest success, because that really is what they can be. Don't feel bad that you don't know them. I'm teaching you. I have a whole book. We're going to give you a whole downloadable guide. Wherever you are, you're in the exact right spot. You're not too old. It's not too late. You're right on time, and better than you know, as Marianne Williamson would say.
Do you see why I love this woman? I mean, my tagline is, you are not broken.
Oh, I love
You're
it.
not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. There's nowhere else you need to be. You don't have to, just embrace this moment. And definitely, your book is so wonderful because it is a guide. So it's a step-by-step guide. There are so many wonderful tools inside of it. So thank you for sharing yourself with us tonight. I really
Sure.
appreciate your time. I can tell
Hey,
that everyone here really, really did enjoy it.
I
So
love it. And I want to, if I can tell you something about something I'm really excited about.
yes.
I have never done it, and I'm finally doing it. I'm finally doing a mastermind. And it's very small. It's only going to be 12 women. And it's not going to be for everyone. It's an investment in your life. But anyway, we start mid-August.
Awesome.
So it's terrycole.com
Okay.
/flourish.
terrycole.com.
Yep.
Sure.
/flourish. So if anyone wants to drop that in the thing, and you guys even just want to look at the website, I'm really, really excited about this because I don't have a one-on-one practice. So this is really the only way that people are. Oh, you did? Linda just got an email about it. Oh my God.
Oh,
Today is the first day we're talking about it. So
well, this is fantastic. Congratulations. I'm
thank
so
you so
excited.
much.
Those 12 women are very lucky ladies, or excuse me. I know we often find ourselves in circles of women, but I know that there are men that value this work so much.
I know. I'm sorry. My thing is only for women, but yes, you are correct. I love the men too. I love all the people, all the gender expressions. I love them all.
All of them. So, well, that's amazing. And so it's terrycole.com. They can find you on Instagram and
Yep.
all
At
around.
Terri Cole, and I've got my podcast that you were on,
Yeah.
the Terri Cole Show. So just put in Terri Cole with an I, and you will find me in all the places. And thank you, Liz, so much for having me and for sharing your people with me. You have profoundly, positively impacted my life, and I am forever grateful.
Thank you. Thank you all. Even Olive wanted to be here tonight. Hear my puppy in the background.
I love it.
She wanted to be here.
I want to squish her.
Awesome, guys. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you in the community.
See ya.
Bye.